there's sacrifice, there's grind, there's intentionality. Sometimes there's all three, mixed up in a bowl, and there you've got your dough to bake. But you have to be intentional about where you want to go. You also have to realize at times you're going to have to sacrifice. Like when we created that step-by-step course the very first time, we did it like late at night. We would put our baby daughter to bed, and it's 10 p.m. Let's work until 1 and try to bang out this section of the course and make sure that gets finished.
Hello, and welcome to the Randall Osché Podcast, where honest conversations take the lead. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, artists, thinkers, and change makers to unpack how they got from there to here and what they learned along the way. Real stories, no filters, lessons earned through experience, so you can take what's useful and leave the rest. Whether you're tuning in during your commute, a workout, or while making dinner, we're glad you're here. So take a seat, relax, grab a cup of tea, and join in the conversation. Now, let's get into this week's episode.
Josh, thanks for being here. Josh is the co-founder of Expats Everywhere. For the people that don't know you yet, why don't you go ahead and take a quick moment and introduce yourself?
Randall, thank you. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, so I'm a small town kid from the border of Virginia and Tennessee in the United States. And I grew up in a place where not many people live abroad, travel abroad even. So my wife and I got started traveling and living abroad in 2009. And we kind of haven't looked back. We started out in Spain, then moved to South Korea, then Saudi Arabia, then Singapore. And finally, we stopped with countries with an S, and we settled in Portugal. And along the way, we started a YouTube channel, and we've had some pretty good success with that and growing the business around that.
Excellent. So I as well, small town kid, USA, was not exposed to international travel. I mean, I don't think until maybe my 30s.
Yeah.
But has been very rewarding, the places that I have been, and I have a desire to move abroad on a permanent to semi-permanent basis. We'll get into that, I'm sure, in a little bit. But nice. Without having, inputs, right? You were saying that you weren't exposed to international travel, so you didn't have those inputs. But how did you get the travel bug with you and traveling to all the countries with the S's in 2009? Like, what were those inputs, and how did you come across them?
Well, I have to give a shout out to my grandmother first and foremost, because, when I was growing up, she had lost her husband, so my grandfather actually, before I was born. And, she had some money from that, and she was able to travel. And whenever she would travel, she would come back with these stories and also trinkets, like little souvenirs that she would give. It really piqued my curiosity as a kid. Like, I remember receiving a boomerang from Australia, a coin set from Turkey. And I don't know if it was the lira at the time, maybe it was, but I just remember, seeing that and being fascinated by it. And then when I went to university, I went to a small liberal arts school, and there were a lot of international students there. So kind of mixing and mingling with different languages and cultures at the school, again, really rose my curiosity to what it would be like to go visit the places from the people I was meeting. And then in that university, I actually did my first travel abroad and had my first travel abroad experience. And that was kind of the turning point for me, as it was a study abroad in Italy. And I was about 2 weeks into the trip, and I realized I haven't tried to phone home. I haven't really thought about this idea of homesickness. And many people told me, like, oh, you're going to get homesick. You're going to be away all summer doing this thing, and you're going to miss, these things, these aspects. I literally didn't even think about it. And I got 2 weeks in, and, I saw like some of my colleagues that were calling home and making the effort. And I was just kind of like, like not that interested. I did, because I knew, like, I felt like my parents might have needed me to check in. Yeah. But man, other than that, it was like, I can do this. Like, that was the real shot in the arm that said, hey, you can do this.
Yeah, it's been my experience that, I think there's a couple barriers that people have that I think, generally speaking, if you haven't done it yet, even gone on a trip abroad, that you think it's harder than it is, more challenging than it is, and more expensive than it actually costs. Like, it can be expensive, but if you plan it appropriately and not even like that well, you can find really affordable flights and hotels, going from the East Coast of USA to, say, Europe somewhere. It's not,
yeah, for sure.
It's not anything burdensome in my experience. When you started traveling, my guess was the idea to travel and just be abroad, or was the idea to travel and then make a business out of it and you did two things simultaneously? Or did the travel lead to Expats Everywhere?
Yeah, that kind of happened later. Expats Everywhere kind of developed out of some of our living experiences while we were living abroad. But no, initially my wife and I, we were dating at the time. We moved to Spain together. We didn't live together, but we moved to Spain together. And the idea was to go and, have a living abroad experience there. So we started out for the first several weeks of making our way to Madrid, traveling. We spent about 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks, doing the very typical American backpacking, 2 to 3 days in each city. Don't think I would recommend that to most people. But we arrived in Madrid both with jobs. So my wife was working as an au pair for a Spanish family. And then I was going to university doing a master's in bilingual multicultural education. And a part of that course is you got a full-time placement in a school. So I worked in a charter school, I had a contract for 1 year, and I both studied at a university and then did this job as an auxiliary teacher. And then at the end of that first year, I was offered to stay on, even though my university program had finished, I was offered to stay on. And my wife as well was happy with her job and being an au pair, so she stayed on with that family. So our first 2 years abroad was stable, working in Madrid.
And that was 2009?
Yeah, that was 2009 to 2011. Exactly.
Yeah. I think I did read it. It was, I think maybe in the description, one of your videos about this was early on and technology wasn't what technology is today. And there's something about like smartphones didn't exist yet. So you had like a car GPS, TomTom, or it
was a Garmin.
A Garmin.
Yeah, it was a Garmin. Yeah.
Walking around in your hand. Is that true?
That is fact. And man, there were a lot of fights because of that silly device and just, getting lost. Because it took a while for the GPS to like actually locate where you were and point you in the correct direction. It wasn't always where you thought it should be. And sometimes you're navigating on driving mode where you should be on pedestrian mode. I mean, it's a bit of a mess, but I think it's much easier now with smartphones and trying to find your way around a city.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common practice that like travel can test, couples. I think that's like the ultimate test sometimes. I think it always gets a little tricky with stress levels high and being in foreign places and maybe not speaking the local language and trying to figure things out.
All of that. I mean, one of the first kind of flashpoints that we had was in London, and it's like everything should be fairly familiar, language and whatnot. But we're passing through a turnstile. And this is like just after we arrive, we're trying to get to the hotel. We're passing through a turnstile in the tube and Kaylee's bag gets stuck, and there's a queue of people that are trying to come in behind us, and we're not wanting to be the dummies that are holding up the line. And we end up pulling the bag through and the handle kind of breaks. So it no longer pushes down. And we ended up having to snap it off like a couple hours later. We had to snap it off because we needed to get it into the trunk of a taxi. And then from that point on, it was like we're having to drag this bag, handleless bag, from city to city along the way until we actually get to Germany. And we meet up with a friend and he's like, guys, let's just mail this thing to your final destination in Spain. He's like, it won't be that much, just get the address from Kaylee's host parents and we'll just send it on. That was definitely important because my legs from dragging this bag were just black and blue because as you're pulling it, sometimes it would catch up with you and just smash into your thigh or your calf, depending on how low you were holding it. It was bad.
Yeah. And that was during your 5 weeks and 2 days kind of per city, right? So I've done that before. Not for 5 weeks at a time, but I've gone on like a week, 2 week trips where like a couple days here, a couple days there.
Yep.
It's good and bad. I think I'm more inclined to say there's more cons for me personally than there are pros. Sure. I'd rather like take my time, but like if time is a constraint, then you got to do what you got to do. But I also have this mentality is like, I can always come back. So why do you think, why is that the mode of travel? Like, why do people go on trips or people go to Europe and they're like, oh, we can do 2 days here, 2 days there, and then we'll come home. But then 2 cities into it, you're like, this is exhausting.
Yeah.
Why did I sign up for this. And then you go like the next year, you do the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think the first thing is you don't know what you don't know. And you don't realize like just how challenging it's going to be. Like this is not a conversation that typically people hear where people are being warned like maybe you shouldn't do this. I think the other thing is people are, especially Americans, because we don't travel maybe as much and we don't make it to Europe as much, we get really ambitious with everything that we want to see and do. And I think that's a pretty big one because you go there, you realize how close, at least on a map, how close two locations are. And you're like, I got this, no problem. Because I think we're used to doing it in the States. And in the States, depending on where you are, what region you're in, things can actually be further apart. Like two interesting cities or major cities can be further apart. So you're considering, okay, it would take 5 hours to drive this distance. But here in Germany, it might be like 2.5, 3 hours on a train to get from this city to that city. But yeah, what you don't realize, I think, is when you arrive, there's just so much time that you have to spend getting your brain caught up to, okay, this is a little bit of a new system. I don't recognize the language or understand the language. I don't know what the meal times are. So you can get thrown off based on that. There's just a lot of nuance to arriving in a city, and it takes a couple of days to figure it out. I mean, even if it takes one day, then that means that your next day before you leave is your only real day where you feel quasi-normal. And then it's rinse and repeat. We've actually noticed now that we have a kid, traveling with her, we've slowed down naturally, right? And we tend to prefer being 3 to 4 days minimum in a place because it gives us time to kind of get a lay of the land, understand it better, and just simply go slower. If we want to, visit a museum, a landmark, and something else, we can do that in a day versus trying to visit 2 museums, 3 landmarks, have the 3 typical dishes and the 2 major beers that we should have in that city. You know what I mean? So we just get a little more time to digest it all.
I like to find like a boutique hotel or something like that. I like to enjoy where I'm staying as well, right? Like if it's a nice hotel or different even, doesn't have to be, I'm not talking like luxury, just like maybe off the beaten path. I want to take a minute, soak it in. And you can't do that if you're there for 24, 48 hours because you're going to be out and about and you're only using the hotel to sleep and you're not enjoying the amenities of like the place that you're actually staying at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing that we appreciate is when we stay somewhere 3 to 4 days is just being able to unpack, taking your stuff out of the suitcase and just getting things set up to where it feels a little more like everyday life. And we agree with you on like getting into a boutique hotel or just something that doesn't look cookie cutter. Yeah. So you get a sense of place and culture in that place. So we were pretty early adopters to Airbnb when that first came out. But, over maybe the past 5 to 10 years, maybe closer to 10 years now, we've started to stay at Airbnbs less and started to opt for hotels a little more. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but we still find that hotels can give you a cultural feel, and then also being able to talk to staff members at the hotel, develop relationships with them and ask questions of what it's like actually living there is helpful as talking to an Airbnb host.
Yeah, I agree. In my experience, Airbnb creates a unique experience as well, but it's nice to be able to speak to staff and have some of those other things that sometimes Airbnbs don't offer.
You don't have to play like an escape game trying to get in the apartment. Like some of the Airbnb failures that we've had trying to get in apartments has indeed been what's put us off. Yeah. Less so than like the geopolitical situations that Airbnbs have caused in different neighborhoods and maybe forcing locals out. Although we see that and we feel that being a pain of locals. So, yeah.
You spent a couple years in Madrid, right? And then from that point on, you're just like, we're not going back. Like, this is where we live now.
Man, that's exactly it. We got about 1.5 years into Madrid and realized that we didn't want to stay in Madrid, but we definitely didn't want to go back. We actually before we left, we developed a 5-year plan. And the idea was we'd spend 2 years in Spain, and then 2 years somewhere else, and then a year in Brazil, because that would be the culminating thing was the World Cup. So we started in 2009. In 2014 was going to be the World Cup in Brazil, and then we would go back to the U.S. and have careers and white picket fence and all that. Life did not play out that way. But we got to 18 months into our time in Spain, and we looked at each other and we were like, Spain's not the place. The vibe, at least here in Madrid, doesn't fit us. We've had a good time, but neither one of us had experienced Asia at all. traveled to Asia, none of it. We didn't even know much about Asian history. But we were like, let's see what's in that part of the world. We had visited a ton of places during our time in Madrid, seeing a ton of European cities, but it's like, we haven't touched Asia. Let's go check that out. Because remember, we had the idea of being in South America for the World Cup, so we didn't even consider South America. So we essentially had 3 countries on our short list to move to, as both of us were going to go and teach English. And it was South Korea, Japan, and Malaysia. And basically, the 2 of the 3 eliminated themselves pretty quickly. The Fukuoka nuclear reactor thing had happened, the tsunami hit it, and there was potentially radiation that was out there. So we were like, that's probably not the time to go to Japan.
Hard no.
Malaysia actually was quite strict, maybe still is quite strict on the requirements to be an English teacher there. So South Korea kind of picked itself because it's a pretty typical like starting point for new English teachers, ESL teachers, and that's English as a second language. So yeah, we went to South Korea and spent 2 years there, had an awesome time. I changed jobs actually after my first year. Kaylee stayed at her school and we had an awesome time, and we felt like Asia, there were enough cool places in Asia that we wanted to make Asia the base for the next several years. And that we did.
Yeah. Visiting different countries and living in different countries, how has that shaped your perspective on life, on work, and like what you value most?
Yeah. I mean, it's done it hugely. Like at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives. So we talk about this a lot. It's a question that we ask every guest. And I think the first thing it did, certainly living in Spain, is it allowed us to see things that function really well in the US that we appreciate, that we take for granted. But then it also pointed out the things that we don't do well that we could borrow from other cultures, whether it be Spain or other European countries. Whenever we were traveling, it's like, oh, this is interesting. I like this. I wish we did this in the US. Or it gave business ideas, because my undergrad degree was actually in business. And then I studied a master's, an MBA. So I've always had kind of a business mindset. So when I go into a place, go into a new country, I start to look at it and analyze it from a business perspective. Like, what are they doing well here? Where are their opportunities? So I mean, really, traveling has just done that. Living abroad has done that, where you pick up little cultural nuances, things that you find positive and negative, and see where the potential business can happen. And Kaylee and I have tried a few different businesses while living abroad, and varying degrees of success, but it's all been fun and all been learning experiences for sure.
I think that's a great segue to what inspired you and your wife to start Expats Everywhere.
It was a couple things, really. I mean, the first thing is it started when we were living, or just before moving to Singapore, and we had been living in Saudi Arabia. And the thing about living in Saudi, at least at that time, was compound life meant that people could get a bit stir crazy. You could get this sense of like cabin fever. And if you weren't doing something productive, you would do something destructive. And a lot of people would get into maybe alcohol or drugs or things like that to kind of pass the time and just numb the experience maybe. Other people we found, they got super productive and started to do things, build businesses. It could be something as simple as like running a cafe on the compound. And people did that, like they would just open up their apartment and make stuff and then sell it unlicensed, but it would run like a cafe. They would have cafe furniture and play music. Like, it was cool. So, we had essentially just moved to Saudi, and about 4 months in, decided to leave Saudi and go to Singapore. We were going to finish out our contract, but we were starting that process of moving again. And if it just felt like we just did this, like, what are we doing? Like, this is exhausting. And I thought, I would pay somebody to do this, like do all this research and all the things that you have to do and just present it to me. Maybe kind of like ChatGPT does now, although we can get into that discussion whether chat's actually good for that. But the light bulb just went off, and I just thought, if I would pay somebody, maybe somebody would pay me. Kaylee and I had already amassed quite a bit of experience knowing what to search for and what things were needed to make a move, and then what things were kind of like luxury considerations that you would have to think about. So the idea was born there, and we started the YouTube channel because we felt like it would be a good lead funnel for people to actually know about the brand and the business, as we wanted to be consultants. And we started interviewing all the people on our compound. You know, we didn't know what we were doing in terms of like videography. I mean, some of those original videos are absolutely shocking. Video, audio, awful. I don't know why anybody watched it. But, you know, it was basically a lead generation. And then what we found over time is we really enjoyed having these kind of conversations with people versus doing the like consulting work. And we've since gotten pulled back into consulting, but for a while, we just went all in on YouTube and started to get better at that, and then just kind of became like a YouTube channel. And that's what we were known for. We're a media company first before anything.
Yeah. I guess one of like my curious questions about like the YouTube and putting yourself out there, what have you learned about building a brand online and a community from scratch and while living internationally? And the living internationally part, of course, fueled what you do online.
I think the biggest lesson is just authenticity. I think that's the foundation of YouTube. If you go back and you listen to what the founders actually talk about the point of YouTube, it's basically like turning a camera on yourself and just being open and honest, your authentic self. I mean, you know, one thing that we don't talk about is politics and religion on the channel, just because it alienates. We try to tread carefully when discussing religion, especially talking about our experience in the Middle East. But, you know, in general, I shouldn't say in general, we are our authentic selves. We don't put everything out there. We lean more into like the technical aspects of moving abroad, the emotional feel, and then we open up financially, which I think a lot of people don't talk about, you know, how much they're spending. That can definitely open you up to criticism. There's a lot of fear around money. People get very fearful when they talk about money. And this is something that I've read in quite a few personal finance books. People have different backgrounds and they're brought up in different ways, and they talk about money differently with their parents. And generationally, things have changed in terms of transparency with talking about money. But Kaylee and I don't mind talking about money. We try to be careful not to lead people the wrong way. So for example, we don't tell people like how much we paid in taxes, because we don't want people to think that's how much they'll owe. Because it's like our sources of income and how we have structured our income is different than to yours. So right. You might get stuck with a larger bill or even pay less. You might be like, ooh, I don't want to pay as much taxes as you. I'll just go somewhere else. But your tax situation actually might be better than ours. So we try to be careful with that. But in terms of like saying, this is how much we spend for rent, this is what we pay for, you know, our daughter's international school or private school, I should say. We open up about that because I think it's important. That's a part of being authentic, right?
Yeah. And so the idea of Expats Everywhere and how you help people is driven by you trying to obtain information that you wish you would have had. And then you and Kaylee became subject matter experts on traveling abroad, living abroad, and certainly being in specific countries, like the good, the bad, and ugly about it. And then you were like, what skills do we have and how do we monetize it? And you've bundled that up into Expats Everywhere to help others do what you've been doing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to say it. I think there are two other kind of components that go into this that are helpful. One is we have amassed a huge network of people because we've lived in so many different places. And when you meet the kind of the hardcore travelers and expats, they don't tend to go back to their home country, but they don't tend to stay wherever they are too long. They just go to the next place. So therefore, like every time they move, kind of the network expands in cool ways. It's like spider webs. And then the other thing is our teaching career. I mean, we spent just about 10 years teaching. So therefore, we acquired kind of those skills to help us present and structure information in a way that is hopefully educational and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I mean, I like ChatGPT, right? We'll get into that for a minute.
Let's do it.
I'm a big fan. I don't know if I was like, it existed. I only started really using it, say like September 2023. But since then, it's probably been a part of my daily life. And I've just used it more and more and tested like, oh, I wonder, I'm like curious about this, or I have this question, or I'm trying to figure out this for work. I wonder if ChatGPT can be useful. And the majority of the time is like, yes. However, and I get maybe the sense of where this conversation is going to go, it doesn't do some things super well.
Correct.
It kind of gives you maybe a little bit below like surface level, but not exactly probably what you need if you are trying to talk to a subject matter expert. So like what maybe, and you can frame this however you want, but maybe what advice can somebody like yourself give somebody that, you know, artificial intelligence wouldn't give or like perhaps mislead?
Yeah, boy, I'm glad that you framed it like that because I was about to go like in 8 different directions with this conversation. But I think, staying narrow to maybe what people need to know. First off, please don't think that I'm trying to be like, Expats Everywhere is the end all be all and you need to listen to our recommendation over anything else. But I think that each individual person that is an expert on certain subject matter still has biases in their opinion that is related to what they're talking about. However, we have to understand that if we're looking at, for example, the migration process to Portugal, to get specific, there are certain things that are foundational and fundamental to make that move a reality. And bureaucracy here, for whatever reason, has been changing so rapidly over the past 5 years, 6 years, that information can become outdated very quickly. And the way, at least the free version of ChatGPT works, it pulls a lot of information that's old. It sources old information. So you're not going to be up to date. It's also a matter of like garbage in, garbage out. So if there's a lot of information out there that's not tight, not accurate, which oftentimes is the case, and you put in a prompt that isn't tight enough, and a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know to ask very specific questions and get very specific with chat. You're going to ask something vague and open, and then you're going to get some really misleading answer and think that that's the way. And just be like, well, I asked chat how to do this, and it said this. But it's like, yeah, a law changed a couple weeks ago, and now that's not the way. Or even a law changed 2 years ago. I mean, we've seen it when we've prompted chat with certain things where literally a law has changed 2 years ago, and it's still saying like that's a step in the process. So you have to be careful with that. I mean, even the Facebook groups and whatnot, people will have old information and they'll talk about it like, this is the way that I moved. But it's like, yeah, you moved in 2023. Now there's a new way in 2025. These things have changed. So that's the biggest thing to be cautious of. The other thing is, when I was kind of alluding to how people use chat, is just in like selecting places to go, things to do. Chat is at the moment like a massive search engine. It's nuanced. It talks conversationally. So it makes you feel comfortable, like it's a friend giving you advice. But the reality is it's just pulling stuff that's already out there. So you might not necessarily be getting the best information that you could get about places or what to do. So Kaylee and I have actually shot a video about the top places to live in Portugal, and we have our own opinions and biases. So we decided to ask chat and create a video based on chat's list. And we didn't know what chat was going to say. We had our podcast producer like rattle off from number 10 to number 1 what cities were on the list. So we were live reacting to like what chat was saying. And it was fascinating what chat said and then why we thought chat said that. We were pretty accurate. Chat was pretty good. I don't want to slam Chat GPT, but there were some on there that it's like, ooh, the prompt didn't do justice for, I think, what most people would want to know and want to build their list out, because maybe they're scouting Portugal and they want to see like, okay, what are the 10 or what are the 5 places that I need to look at for my situation? If you don't prompt chat right, you're going to end up getting sent to a couple cities that should simply not be on your list.
Yeah, it is a massive tool, but you have to be careful about the garbage in, garbage out. You have to be good and build like your prompt muscle. And then you always got to verify, like at least this is past the smell test, and then go look at like, where's this information coming from? Because there's been, I mean, I think that's part of the process is like, you need to verify the information because, I mean, I was doing something, I was using it for work and I was trying to find a study to get some benchmark data from, and I was having a hard time trying to find it. I asked ChatGPT and it gave me a report, like a study that was done, but it was like from 2014. And that's quite a bit ago.
Yeah, more than 10 years. Come on.
Yeah.
Can't use it.
So how did we land in Portugal? I get the sense, and maybe I'm wrong, that you've been there for a bit and might continue to be there for a bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So, after finishing out our kind of final contract in Singapore, we had the desire to move back to Europe. We actually took a trip to Hong Kong, and while in Hong Kong, we slipped over to Macau. And we're wandering the streets of Macau, and something felt like weirdly familiar, weirdly European about it. And we were like, what is this? Like, this feels nice. What's going on? And then we realized the connections between Macau and Portugal. So it kind of put Portugal back on our brains. When we were talking about leaving Asia and coming back to Europe, we actually were considering basing ourselves in a different part of the continent because we had already been really Western or Iberian. We'd been Western Europe, Iberian Peninsula. So our first place that we thought of was Slovenia, another S, because it would have given us a base in that region, kind of that Central European-ish region where we could see more of those countries that we hadn't visited. But the reality is we were kind of tired after 10 years of teaching. Like we wanted a break and we wanted a new experience. So then we started looking at, what are some of the easier visas that we could get as Americans that were working kind of freelance. And Portugal shot straight to the list. And when we saw it, we were like, this is it. It took us back to the time in Macau where we had experienced what we had experienced. It took us even further back to when we lived in Spain and traveled a bunch to Portugal. We already knew that we liked Portugal. And back in 2000, I think it was the fall of 2009, when we visited Porto for the first time, I told Kaylee, I was like, one day we're going to live here. Now, at the time, we thought it was going to be as teachers. And we didn't look at Portugal as teachers because the wages are so low here. Like it didn't make sense. We would have been taking like a professional step back or two. We didn't want to do that. So we didn't consider it. But when we saw that there was this D7 visa, which is the visa many people call the retiree visa, but it's not technically, it's more like passive income. We were like, okay, we qualify for this. Let's give it a shot. Let's move to Portugal.
Yeah, excellent.
Let's take a quick break from today's episode. If you're enjoying the conversation, take a second to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're tuning in. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us on Instagram at Randall Osché. That's RANDALLOSCHE. And check out more at podcast.randallosché.com, including show notes and other resources from today's episode. All right, back to the conversation.
So how long have you been there? Are you in Porto now?
Yeah, we're in Porto. We've been living in Porto the whole time, although we've traveled the country, filming content and making videos. But we've been here almost 5 years. So it'll be 5 years in a couple of months.
You said earlier when you were living in Madrid, Spain,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's a question coming here, but maybe you could talk about Portugal versus Spain or Porto versus Madrid. But what were some of the things that you might not have liked about Madrid? You said like this wasn't the place for you, but how is Porto different or make up for maybe some of those deficiencies or things that were misaligned for you guys in Madrid but are aligned in Porto?
Yeah, first and foremost, Kaylee and I have realized over time that we're not capital city people. The kind of the mentality that you get in capital cities that we've experienced basically all over the world is pretty similar. It's very fast paced. Relationships there can be hard work and sometimes feel artificial or feel like there's some sort of like economic exchange that needs to happen. So we found in second cities, they offer enough amenities and the relationships are more right with kind of the type of people we are. So in Madrid, for example, people can be what we would perceive as rude in terms of the way they are. Their directness can be a bit abrasive. This isn't all Spaniards. This is more typical to Madrid. They're much more nationalistic. And I mean, we can say whatever we want about nationalism. Aspects of it are okay. Other aspects can get very ugly. But it's nationalism to the point where it's just exhausting. Everything that is Spanish is the best. And it's like you don't have enough experience outside of Spain to actually be able to say that. It's like when Americans say that too, like USA is the best, I kind of roll my eyes as well. It's like, well, you haven't lived in enough places to actually come to the conclusion that there is no the best. It's just different. And some places are better than others, certainly in some areas of life. I think Porto for us, perfect size. The people here are very authentic. They're like hard people. Though I think the climate here kind of hardens people versus Lisbon and further south being more sunny or I should say sunnier and gentler, weather. But people up here are industrious and oftentimes like pitted against Lisbon. So there's kind of a little bit of this like chip on their shoulder, but the people are really authentic. Like there's a real heart here and we identify with that. The people are very kind. Even though there's this hardness, people are very kind. It's slower here, so people will take time out of their day, like to just help out. If they see that you're lost or you need advice on something, they'll slow down and stop. It's not something that we experienced in Madrid. And also, it's not something that we really experience when we visit Lisbon. Although people in Lisbon are nice. Like by comparison, Portuguese we find are nicer than Spanish.
Yeah. So the YouTube channel, and maybe this is going to be like selfish questions for me. I started the podcast because I wanted to, meet new people, have conversations, learn from those conversations, and then share those conversations so other people can learn from it as well. And I really enjoy the process. I would like to grow, of course, my audience and my influence. When I look at your channel, I think almost close to 100,000 subscribers. I don't know, you've probably been doing it for a long time, but maybe what's some advice that you would give me or for somebody who's trying to get into the space of having a YouTube channel or a podcast or a video podcast? I think that we're calling them now, to grow your audience and grow your influence.
Yeah, we got some really great advice early on. We did a paid YouTube consultation with somebody from Social Blade. And then we also did another consultation some months later with a guy on Fiverr who had done like a YouTube. He was invited by YouTube to do this boot camp to help grow. So basically he was pitching himself as being a little bit of a guru that could explain things based on the way YouTube acts and the way YouTube promotes stuff. So he's like, here's what I learned at this boot camp. Let me help your channel. And he was based in India. So it was actually really nice to hear his perspective, because the way YouTube functions is a little different between North America and India. And the economics of it, I think, are quite different. But basically, we heard the same advice from both, and it's something that it took us forever to do, which was turn the camera on ourselves. We had focused so much on interviewing and talking to other people and giving their experience. The problem is we didn't give our audience enough reason to come back to our channel. Like they would click and watch a video, and it would be good, and they would get good information. But like, we could have been for a longer period of time the anchors to the channel, but we didn't even show our face. Like we were always behind the screen asking the questions. We only had like one camera set up at the time, and it was just focused on the interviewee. And we would have a similar interview format every single time, but there was no connection that we made with the audience. But as soon as we turned the camera on ourselves, and it was a little more vlog style at the beginning, we started to let kind of people in on our life. And I think for most YouTube channels, it's foundational, is to be that anchor of your channel, to let people get to know who you are, see if they can identify with you. It's a little self-selecting. Some people will opt out because they're like, I don't like this guy. He wears glasses, or he's too clean shaven, in the case of me and you. And they'll not come back, and that's fine. But then you'll end up finding like your avatar. So this kind of leads into a little more complex conversation. Is you find your avatar, you start to figure out like, who are you making content for? And oftentimes the avatar actually looks like yourself, or it's you at different stages of life. Maybe it's the you in your 20s. Maybe it's the you 20 years from now that you're making videos for, that you want to give advice to or give information to. And then I think the other aspect of that, since we can kind of discuss business, is figure out your monetization strategy. Because while this can be an awesome hobby, if you want to do it well, it's life consuming. It turns into a full-time job, and it can turn into a full-time job as quickly as you want it to. But that doesn't mean that it's going to turn into a full-time income. The income happens, and sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not. But having a monetization strategy and having a clear idea of how you want to earn money and earn a living from the channel, I think is really important. Honestly, it's paramount to like a self-sustaining business. Without it, you could end up being burnt out and just not having any sort of motivation to continue the thing. And then that doesn't benefit you or the audience when you quit.
Yeah. So my strategy is just to do things and see what happens. Not a good strategy.
I wouldn't say that. I think you're probably at the point where you're doing like ready, fire, aim, which is totally fine in the beginning. I don't think that people have to write some like exhaustive business plan on their YouTube channel and how they're going to be a business when they're first starting out. I think the most important thing, honestly, and this is advice that we also got, is like you don't actually become a creator until at least 20 videos, that you've published 20 videos, you've shot, edited, published 20 videos, gotten the feedback from the audience, and then said, I want to make video number 21. And, I'm not talking about like AI generated shorts here. I'm talking about like where you actually plan what the piece is, you shoot it, you edit it, and you put it out there. Because during the editing process, you're going to learn a lot. Kaylee and I learned a crap ton about where we were good at communicating and where we were awful at communicating. And all of the ums and uhs and ticks and things that we would do that honestly made it cringy to watch. Like we would start to see that. And then our presentation skills would improve over time. And that's important. Like without having that aspect of it, that early growing and adaptation to being comfortable on camera, it's hard to go anywhere. And it's hard to figure out what your monetization strategy is. But once you get about 20 videos in and you start to see a little bit of growth or traction, I would definitely start to consider like, okay, what am I actually trying to do here? What do I want this thing to be? It will change along the way, but having an idea of what you want it to be, I think is really important. I have a little story about it if you want to hear.
I would love to.
And it's not mine. It's a friend of ours that we've made through the YouTube space. So there's this guy that we just interviewed with, finally, Portuguese with Leo, and we met pretty early on in both of our real YouTube growth journeys. And we had a pretty deep conversation about what we were trying to do, monetization wise and growth wise. And he had a very clear path about how he wanted to grow his channel first, subscriber base, average view, and then start to add things that would be monetization wise connected back to him, like subscription models, starting courses and things like that. But he first wanted his foundation to be 100,000 subscribers. And he said, I will not touch any other monetization until I hit 100,000 subscribers. For us, we had an opposite approach. The very first time somebody said to us, how can we like support you? How can we pay you? And we were like, I don't know, PayPal? And they're like, no, have you ever heard of this thing called Patreon? We're like, nope, haven't heard of Patreon. And it's like, oh, well, it's this platform that you can like, as a creator, get paid by your audience, da-da-da-da-da. And we were like, okay, never heard of it. Let's look into it. And this guy, Jeff, basically said, once you get it set up, I'll be your first patron. Like I'll be the OG. And we quickly found out how to set it up and we did it. But we waited until our audience asked for it. And that's been kind of a theme that we've done. When people ask for a step-by-step course on the D7 visa and how to move to Portugal, when they asked, we were like, yeah, we can do that. We've basically created a bunch of free videos to guide you. But if you want to pay for a course, we'll make it. We'll make a course. We'll kind of streamline the process. And we created that, put it out there. And so we've reacted to what our audience has asked for in terms of what they're willing to pay for. But Leo's had amazing success at waiting till he got his foundation of viewers and then starting to launch his monetization. So there's no wrong answer, I don't think. It's just you have to have an idea of where you want to go.
Yeah, I think the other thing I think about when you say that, and thanks for sharing, is I think of things like that through like capacity, right? There's no right or wrong answer, but you have to understand that taking time away from growing your subscribership, because that's going to take effort, and doing something else, your subscribership is then not going to grow as fast. And it's neither right nor wrong, but if somebody's asking for Patreon, like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and figure out Patreon, get that set up, and then maybe put that out into the world. That's going to take time. And if you're trying to do two things simultaneously, you don't have 100% to give to either. And again, it's neither right nor wrong. I think people just need to recognize what you're doing, right? You have to be deliberate about it, I think is probably the biggest part there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a great summary of it, because that was the conversation that I had with Leo. He's like, if I take time away to create these things while I'm on my road to 100K, I won't get to 100K. And he felt like having the 100K platform, or whatever you want to call it, baseline, and having the check mark that YouTube gives you as like a verified creator or whatever, and the plaque and everything, would give him the credibility that he was looking for to do these other things, which I agree with him. It made a ton of sense for his channel. Ours, we felt like, was more niche. We're still hunting down the 100K, don't get me wrong.
You're close.
But we also realize that it's going to be a slower process for us, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's neither right nor wrong. I think, like you said, it's just you have to have a strategy and be deliberate. Like one of the things that I think, and working with different people, in my experience, is I don't think people are intentional or deliberate enough, right? Like in order to accomplish something, you have to know what that something is that you're trying to do. Like a lot of people just wake up and like do things, and then they get upset about like not being where they want to be at in life. And it's like, okay, well, where do you want to be at? It's like, well, I don't know. Or like, I can't figure it out, or it gives me anxiety. It's like, all right, well, you need to overcome those things to be able to get to where you want to be and live the life that you want to have. But unless you identify that, you're not going to be able to accomplish it because you don't know what that direction is.
Yeah, exactly. There's sacrifice, there's grind, there's intentionality. Sometimes there's all three, mixed up in a bowl, and there you've got your dough to bake. But you have to be intentional about where you want to go. You also have to realize at times you're going to have to sacrifice. Like when we created that step-by-step course the very first time, we did it like late at night. We would put our baby daughter to bed, and it's 10 p.m. Let's work until 1 and try to bang out this section of the course and make sure that gets finished. And then we'll see where we land. And then the next day, we'll do it again from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And Kaylee and I, we like our sleep, like we don't like to work late into the evening, but we knew that we needed to do that because we were also trying to keep up with our regular content production. So we couldn't steal time from any other time. Like we had to add more hours to our workday because there was no way to just move 3 hours of our normal workday and keep up our pace. So we made that sacrifice, and that sacrifice has paid off tremendously. We're so thankful, that we did that. And we don't remember the lost sleep during that small period of time. We look on it more with like, it hardened us in a way where we know if we had to do it again, we could do it. Much like our time in Saudi Arabia. It's like, if anything ever gets sticky and we need to make some money, we can always go back to Saudi Arabia. It wasn't that bad. So it's just like that. We use those experiences to frame our mindset to how we're going to get things accomplished.
As somebody who's trying to move to Portugal now, and I'm working through my process, which I'm heavily using ChatGPT for my D8 nomad visa, which this conversation has me rethinking that I need to double check some of those steps, maybe by your course. But talk me through that. Like, what's some things you think I should know, or some questions I should be asking myself, or just like pack a suitcase and get there as soon as I can?
There's a lot to unpack there. Okay, so I think the main thing, and this is something that we just recently talked about on a live stream, was with the D8 course. So the D8 is for active income. So if you're saying that you're going to move to Portugal with like a remote job, and your source of earning is that remote job, then that's active income. And there's a requirement, there's a minimum that you have to meet for living in Portugal. And it's different than the passive income route. So right now it's 4 times the minimum wage. Well, the Portuguese government has announced that over the next several years, every year, they're raising how much the minimum wage is. So I think right now it's like $8.70. Kaylee knows these numbers better than I do because I focus on the content. She focuses on consultations now. So I think it's $8.70. So you'll have to go $8.70 times 4, but that's in euros. And if you're working in Canadian dollar or USD, then you have to look at like, with the currency exchange on an average, how am I doing? Am I close to the threshold? Am I way above it? If you're way above it, awesome. Like kudos to you, you're good to go. But if you're close, that's going to be more problematic, right? So you have to keep your eye on that, and knowing that that number is going to change every year for the next several years because the government is trying to get the national minimum wage up to a higher level that's more equal to kind of the European average. The other things that you'll have to consider would be time in country that you're able to stay and how that changes over time. So like if you're wanting to live here, 6 months on, 6 months off, that's not possible. You have to be here longer than that according to the parameters of the residence permit. And that also changes depending on the length of your residence permit. So when you're here for 2 years, like on your first residence permit, it's a 2-year permit. The way it's worded right now is you can't be out of Portugal more than 6 months consecutively or 8 months on the aggregate during your visa period or your residence permit period. Well, the problem with that is your next permit is 3 years. So now you've gone down from basically being able to, simple math, do 4 years or 4 months in a year out of the country to equal your 8 to now like 2 and some change, like 2 to 3 months that you can be out. So that has caught people out. People that are just here to live and like do some traveling, not a problem. But people that are wanting to really spend certain seasons, not in Portugal, but back in the US or Canada or the UK or whatever, you've got to be kind of aware of that, because it's not something that you're going to realize just going through the steps that it takes to get the visa, because it's a separate thing. Because now you have the permit, you need to hold on to that thing, right? You don't just, want to give it up after being here for 2 years.
Yeah.
Most people don't anyways.
Yeah.
So I think those are two critical things to have a think about. But there's a lot. I mean, there are several considerations that people need to have as they go through the steps. But those are the two that we've noticed here lately, people just flat out don't consider.
So you get the visa, and then the resident permit is separate of that. And the resident permit dictates how long you have to stay, or else you lose the visa, or else you don't get the opportunity to be
resident.
Get
the permit renewal. You don't get the permit renewal. So after your 2 years, then you'll have to make an appointment to do the renewal to get another permit to stay. So it basically moves your expiry date, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll get it for, right now they've been doing 2 years and 3 years. So you do 2 years for the first one, 3 years for the second one, and then you can do another renewal depending on what you want to do. You could stay a temporary resident, you could ask for permanent residence, or at the time of this recording, and it's probably going to change, you could ask for citizenship. But citizenship by naturalization may or may not be changing by the time this goes out.
Yeah, we are recording June of 2025. That's something I meant to say at the beginning when we started, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So some of the questions I like to ask all my guests, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had this advice anyways, but just try stuff, And I felt like I did a good job of that, just like trying stuff and trying different businesses. And, most of them didn't work out. For the most part, I kept the initial monetary investment quite low, but just try stuff, because you'll always learn something, whether it's something negative that you learn or something positive or someone that you've met and put in your network. There's always something that'll come out of just trying stuff. That would be kind of the big piece of advice, is just give myself that reaffirming attitude of just trying stuff. It's a good philosophy to have.
What is one of the failures you've had with those earlier businesses that has helped you with Expats Everywhere?
The biggest failure that I've had in business, I don't know if it really helped with Expats Everywhere, but this is the first thing that popped to mind, is a business partner of mine and I had a pretty decent investment in a coffee company in Istanbul. And it was an American guy that Kaylee and I met while we were in Saudi Arabia. Things went south around COVID, but he and I worked together to kind of forensically break down what happened and figure out where things went really wrong. And we learned a ton. It was like a 25K at least mistake that we have basically dubbed an MBA in business. We learned there were some interpersonal things that could be improved on in terms of communication, setting right expectations, pushing people that are, like if you're investing and you're investing in a small or medium-sized business and you see, or your business instincts tell you that something's not quite right or something's not set up right, speak up and don't just assume that this person knows everything. Because I think that a lot of the mistakes that were made in the dissolution of that business could have been prevented had we spoken up earlier and been like, hey, we need to put together a board. We're growing really fast. I'm not sure this is sustainable. How is this money being used? That type of thing. I don't see the application to Expats Everywhere at the moment, because Kaylee and I, we own the business and we kind of control it. And it's not to the point where it needs a board, but I think we kind of are the board. At least we're the sounding board with each other, and we have the power to make decisions. Whereas in that other business, we didn't have any power really to make decisions. We could be a sounding board, but the CEO didn't want that. So that was a huge learning experience and something that it's definitely stayed with me. No longer eats at me, but definitely has stayed with me.
I mean, I think one of the things that I think about a lot, and I don't remember where I heard this first, but there's always a cost of education. And you just said like that was a $25,000 like MBA that you and Kaylee like both had. You learned from it.
Yeah.
I think that is exactly what it was, right? Now you know, and when you go to approach another investment potentially or start a new business in the future, you're going to be able to do that better based on your experience that you had. And that investment would have had to come in some form, whether like time, energy, effort, in this case, like resources, and the resource was the money for you to learn. I think a lot of people approach things, whether it's going to the gym for the first time, starting a business for the first time, and they expect like outsized results for the level of expert they are at the time, right? But it takes time to go to the gym and learn how to use the gym and learn how your body's going to react to certain things and your capacity to how much you can lift and the weights you can throw around. And same thing with like starting a business. If you've never done it before, you have to set realistic expectations for yourself that it's going to take long, it's going to be hard, we're going to have to push, and we're going to learn new things, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and we're probably not going to be profitable right off the bat. And I think a lot of people start companies or businesses and they expect like, oh, well, I see other people doing it, like give me 30, 60, 90 days and I'll be like, have my Amazon shop and be rolling in the money. Or it doesn't work that way. Not to discourage anybody, but there's always a cost of education. And if you haven't done the thing before, then you're going to have to learn how to do the thing. And that's going to come at an expense, time, energy, effort, money, resources, etc.
Yeah, it takes time to develop competency. And I think when competency is developed, you tend to enjoy yourself more because things become a little more natural and easier. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And as we get close to wrapping up here, where can the listeners go find you and Kaylee at?
Yeah, the principal channel that we have is Expats Everywhere on YouTube, but you can find us at ExpatsEverywhere.com as our website. And then we also host a podcast for people specifically looking to move to Portugal. That is Expats Everywhere Presents Let's Move to Portugal podcast. So people can definitely pop over there if they're specifically interested in podcasts and learning about moving to Portugal. But the main YouTube channel is how to see us. And then if you want to email, don't email me, email Kaylee at info@expatseverywhere.com. People can email me. I'm contact at expatseverywhere.com if you have specific questions for me. But if you're looking for like advice on moving to Portugal, then it's her. Yeah, she's the one.
Yeah, she's actually scheduled you for this podcast. I scheduled it with her for
Exactly. She's the admin person of the two of us for sure. That's not my strong suit. I'm really good at double booking us or forgetting to put in something in the schedule. I'm amazing at that. So if you need somebody to double book you, I'm your guy. But in general, I focus on content ideation and getting actual videos out, where even though Kaylee appears on our videos a lot, she usually just like rocks up, brushes her hair and is ready to go. I'm the one kind of behind the scenes that's actually getting the videos pulled together, both from an idea to then an execution. So those are our roles. So people that are looking for like a consultation or just to get a question answered, contact her. info@expatseverywhere.com.
Appreciate that. Josh, co-founder of Expats Everywhere, other co-founder wife, Kaylee, who isn't present, but thank you for joining me. Thanks for being part of this, and looking forward to staying in contact with you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having us on, and we wish you all the best getting your podcast rolling.
All right. Thanks.
Good luck. Take care.
And that wraps up today's conversation on the Randall Osché Podcast. Thanks again to our guest for sharing their time, knowledge, and lessons with us. If the episode brought you any value, the best way to support the show is to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform. That helps us reach more people like you. You can also visit podcast.randallosché.com for blog posts, full transcripts, and other episode resources. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep moving forward.